Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad that you've joined us today. My name is Sarah Bunin-Benor, and I'm the director of the HUC JIR Jewish Language Project. And we have a wonderful event for you today, which is part of a broader series about Jews on TV. And I use the term TV broadly to include streaming services and even shows that are not yet available in the United States. So today we will be talking about Chanshi. This event is co-sponsored by IKAR, my wonderful congregation in Los Angeles. And the Israeli show Chanshi is produced by Kastina Production Company and shown on the Israeli TV network Hot. Chanshi features a young Orthodox woman from Brooklyn who makes aliyah. In Jerusalem, she encounters a whole new world. The Mizrahi Jews and tough Israeli soldiers she fantasizes about, her religious friend struggling with her sexual orientation, and a gaggle of English-speaking women, known as Anglos in Israel. Although the show deals with intense issues like Israeli politics, religiosity, sexuality, mental illness, and assault, it offers a delightful viewing experience. And I know that those of you who've joined us today have mostly watched the first 4 episodes, which we were so glad that we could make available with English subtitles. But the current show is 10 episodes, and we will be showing some scenes from those other episodes. The show also provides an insider's look into the language of American immigrants to Israel. The American and British characters seamlessly mix Hebrew and English, and the Americans in the older generation use a very Brooklyn accent, which you'll see a clip from. And the Orthodox Anglo characters' Jewish English includes many Ashkenazi Hebrew and Yiddish influences like Shavuos Chol HaMoed, Mensch, Soon by You, and more. And so today we are going to analyze this language use. And we're so honored to have 2 of the show's creators and stars with us today. And we are going to be talking about the language in this show with one scholar of Jewish language and also with myself. And just a quick note about my own background, I wrote a book called Becoming Frum: How Newcomers Learn the Language and Culture of Orthodox Judaism. And so I have background in this language use. And our other scholar today, Sharon Avni, is a professor of academic literacy and linguistics at CUNY, the City University of New York. As a linguistic anthropologist with an interest in contemporary American Judaism, Sharon focuses her scholarship on Hebrew in the American context, including Jewish day schools, public schools, and summer camps. She and I wrote a book together along with Jonathan Krasner called Hebrew Infusion, Language and Community at American Jewish Summer Camps. And her current project is a book focusing on why American Jews talk a lot about Hebrew despite not knowing the language well. Born and raised in New York, Sharon moved to Israel at the age of 23 and learned to speak Hebrew in many ulpanim and university classes. Also with us today, we are so happy to have 2 of the show's creators and stars. Aleeza Chanowitz was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, and attended the Yeshiva of Flatbush. She made aliyah in 2011 and studied at the Sam Spiegel Film School in Jerusalem. And she is the creator, writer, and star of Chanshi. Marnina Schoen is an actor in Los Angeles. And besides Chanshi, other favorite credits of hers include Once the Musical, More Guns at Second City, and a new play at the Museum of Tolerance, musical improv on Dropout, I think that's right, Hulu's Dollface, and projects she's co-created with her partner, Michael Okonis, including a musical comedy web series about the Torah developed in the Jewish Writers Initiative. And I will add personally that I have enjoyed her starring roles in some of IKAR's amazing Purim spiels. So I'm going to start by showing some clips from Chanshi. The first clip is, let me pull this up. The first clip is from a scene where Chanshi is attending an ulpan. And I'm going to share my screen right now.
כשאני עומד sur la balance, à la משקל, היא אומר לי, לא, רק אחד, רק בן אדם אחד.
יפה מאוד. ומי את? איך קוראים לך?
אני חנשי מברוקלין.
ולמה עלית לישראל? בעברית.
כי...
ולמה איחרת?
כי הבנק חרא והם גנבו ממני עמלה. ובמדינה צריך לריב כל הזמן, they're always trying to one-up you.
ככה מתנהגים ישראלים, מה לעשות?
בסדר, but it's exhausting, it's like...
רק שנייה. תניחו את העיתונים, תחזרו אחריי, מסע ומתן. יפה. עכשיו, עשה. תן לי משפט של משא ומתן עם אחד מהביטויים שעל הלוח.
אני עושה משא ומתן מול הבנק, להנחה. אני צריך להראות להם שאני עולה חדש.
להוכיח, to prove. וקיבלת הנחה? לא. הנה, אז בבקשה. זה מה שאנחנו קוראים פרייר. בישראל אף אחד לא רוצה להיות פרייר. אתם צריכים ביטחון עצמי. אז בואו נעשה איזה תרגיל. חנשי. קומי בבקשה. קומי. תנו לה מחיאות כפיים. יפה מאוד. שימו לב, אנחנו נשחק משחק. לחנשי יש משהו שאנחנו רוצים, ואתם צריכים לנהל את המשא ומתן. דליה, בואי, קומי בבקשה. את מנהלת את המשא ומתן, אבל רק בעברית, ולא פירוד. זה עשינו מספיק. בבקשה.
אני נתנת לך פרחים מגינה שלי.
Okay, I know we all want to keep watching, but we do need to get into our conversation today. So, and I will show more clips later on in our event today. So first, let's bring our panelists on. And I want to just start by asking Aleeza, why did you create this? Who is the audience? What is your goal with creating this series?
The bottom line is my goal was, well, I went to film school. I feel like I need to backtrack a little. I went to film school in Israel because after I made aliyah, I didn't really know what I was gonna do with myself. I had absolutely no plan, so I went to film school and I really loved it. And it was the best thing I ever did. It was like so much fun. It was a really great way to acclimate into Israeli society. And they taught me there at the Sam Spiegel School, really kind of like, he would say, Ma petzashach, like, what's your wound? Do you know what I mean? Like, what's a story that you can tell? So I just remember when it came to the short films that I had to do in school, you know, you always come with this idea of like, I have to write a masterpiece. I have to do something that everyone's going to like. And that never works. Well, for me, it never works. So I was like, let me just do something that I find funny or entertaining. That sounds fun for me to do from the beginning of the writing to the production to the editing and everything. And in my two short films, I wanted to act in them. I thought it was fun. And I dealt with like the world of like Olim Chadashim, of new immigrants and everything. And, you know, a bunch of the themes that also came up in the series. And then when I finished school, I had a meeting with the woman who's in charge of dramatic content at HOT. And she was like, did you want to do a series? And I never wanted to do a series because I went to film school. I wanted to do a film. But I realized I needed a job and this was an opportunity. So I just said, yes, I have so many ideas. I have so many ideas. So really it was, the bottom line is I just wanted to make some money. I just wanted to somehow support myself when I came out of film school. Right now they're working on sales for the US. I know that things are a little bit tough with the writer strike, whether that's in my best interest or it's not. I don't really know the workings of that, but it's just like when you come to actually writing something, do I have like, I don't have any agenda or anything. I want it to be entertaining. Obviously, that was my number one thing. Like, am I going to find it funny? Am I going to find it entertaining? Am I going to find it interesting? And hopefully other people will also find it interesting.
Well, that is certainly the case because we have many people asking how they can get the other 6 episodes. And I guess the answer to that is not yet, but eventually.
Hopefully soon. Yes,
Okay.
hopefully soon.
We did get permission to show clips from the other episodes, but unfortunately there are no English subtitles because they're not yet, ready for distribution to English-speaking audiences. As you know, the show was shown on Israeli TV, and so the captions are all in Hebrew, and the Hebrew captions are there for the Hebrew lines and for the English lines, which made it easier for me as a Hebrew speaker who's not completely advanced to understand all the Hebrew lines. But I know those clips that we're showing today are going to be hard for people to understand if they don't speak Hebrew. So thank you, Aleeza. And Sharon, that scene that we just saw, would you say that is similar to how Olim experience Ulpan and learning language when they moved to Israel?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to be with you all. When Sarah brought this idea up a few months ago, I watched the first 4 episodes. And then about a week ago, I realized I had access to the whole series. I realized I needed to watch it in preparation for today. And so I watched it twice. I've watched the 10 episodes twice over the past week. And so I'm fully immersed. And it has been haunting me. And I have been talking to people all the time about this show that is not available to anybody else. And so I hope it really does become available soon so that I can continue the conversations that I've been having both in my mind and with others. I will say that I moved to Israel when I was a young 23-year-old woman. I'm not modern Orthodox or Orthodox, and so my experience of the community I joined when I moved to Israel was radically different. I mean, in many ways, my experience is radically different from the one that Chanshi has for lots of reasons, both good and bad. But I will say that there were moments of the show that spoke so directly to experiences I had. And especially the second time I watched it, and the first time I watched it more for the plot because it's just so absorbing. And the second time I really focused on more of the language. And I guess a few things really struck out to me. So first of all, about the Ulpan, oh my goodness. I felt like that was every Ulpan experience that I was probably in. And I was in many. I took Ulpan Aleph at least 10 times. I failed it and they just kept putting me back into the beginning Ulpan thing. And the actor, the teacher, the student, I just loved, let's have this random conversation about like things. This is just everything about that really spoke to me. And if anyone has ever done an Ulpan in Israel, I think you really capture that dynamic of just this like random, let's like throw words on the board and make us use them. And in some ways it works, right? I mean, we all actually learn the language, but it's just so that really spoke to me. And so many other things in the show spoke to me. So I just want to raise some of these things. And then I'm going to look forward to hearing your thoughts about them. So the first one is, I was struck by how seamless the language experiences are in the series. And so Sarah used that word, and so I'll continue with it. And what I mean is that there's a lot of moments throughout the 10 episodes, but even in the first 4, where Aleeza, your character, Chanshi, is really lost. I mean, she's physically lost. Like she's in places, sometimes endangered perhaps, and other times just sort of lost. However, language, the use of the language is never a moment in which there's ever any confusion or getting lost. Meaning, so a lot of the time, Chanshi, Aleeza. I'll say Chanshi because it's not Aleeza, it's the person she was portraying. Chanshi is using Hebrew that at times has some errors here and there, but it's a very communicative Hebrew, right? With a variety of people, but there's never a moment where someone says, wait, I don't understand what's going on. What are you talking about? There, even when she has to be corrected or something like that, there's never this moment where it's like, I don't know what's going on. And I thought that was really interesting. And so I'm really curious to what degree her choice to use English or Hebrew, because you're fairly fluent and comfortable with the language. That's a pretty advanced Opan even that you're in. Again, I took Opan all of like 10 times, so I remember the basic ones. But I was curious about how much, when you thought about the writing of this, how much were you thinking, this is a moment where I want her to be speaking English, or this is a moment where I want her to be speaking Hebrew, and or a combination of both? So that's just a question, because it didn't seem to me that it wasn't that the character wasn't able to always do it in Hebrew, but there might have been other things at work. So I was just curious about how much of that was actually intentional in the writing. The second thing I just want to raise very quickly about the language and this notion of like how seamless it was in many ways, was that what really struck me, and this also resonates with my own experience, was the fact of what we might think of like a privilege, of the English speaker privilege in Israel. And I was very aware of that. I moved to Israel with no money. I had no plans either. I was completely lost and just a mess, right? But I moved to Israel, and despite all of my kind of, crazy ideas and weird jobs I had to have just to make a living and all of this kind of stuff, I had English. And it conferred upon me this privilege, which I think I was aware of it, but not as aware of it as maybe I am now. But you were able to assert that privilege at times in really powerful ways. I mean, the series to me is really about power dynamics in all sorts of ways, and breaking down boundaries in all sorts of spaces. But by speaking English in certain moments, or making others use English for you, that's a real power move. And I was just wondering also to what degree that was intentional. Did you see language as another form of this power dynamic that gets played out, in the scene where she's asking the soldier to essentially rape her, or, I think it's in episode 4. I think it's in one of the ones everyone saw. That's a scene that's fully in English for the most part. And so I thought this is really interesting, like when English gets sort of used and not. And so those are some of the questions, your ability to mock the Israelis at times, especially Noki does that a lot. She uses like a mocking, like at one point in episode 7 or 8, you're mocking like, well, I don't think we need to do, you mock Israelis speaking English. So I'm curious about those two things. So the first thing is sort of the seamlessness, or how much that was planned as a part of her character, of someone who's both lost but trying to deal with all these issues, and then also as something of a way of asserting power. And I'll go on to mute.
So Aleeza and Marnina, do you want to address that? And then I'll show a scene that has Marnina in it, so you can get more of a sense of how the language is used.
I'll just say a bunch of things, and then Marnina will say whatever bunch of things she wants. She'll say one thing. First of all, there's what I intended, and then there's the show is out there, and I have no control over that, and that's what's nice. And it's interesting to hear what other people take of it. I'm going to say a bunch of things, and hopefully I'll answer somehow your questions, things that really popped up. One thing is, I'm kind of starting with the end, which is what you were talking about with Marnina, when she was making fun of the accent, things like that. I think that it's something, first of all, I make fun of Israeli accents all the time, and they make fun of my accent all the time. And sometimes it's not even something that it's like, it's mocking, but sometimes they think it's cute. Like, I don't think it's something that's like, I don't take it as offensive. And I also wonder sometimes about if I were to want to do this series from America and not from Israel, with kind of like the way things are PC and people are scared to say certain things. I wonder if the series would have come out the same way if I had done it from an American production company with American money. And, you know, it's just a question I kind of like, I don't have any answer, but I feel like it relates to this kind of idea of, can you make fun of someone, and when is it take as a compliment? When is it okay? And on screen. In terms of switching between languages. Oh, okay, again, backtracking a little. I realized very quickly on the fact that I speak English gives me a certain kind of privilege. People speak English, and if I can't understand something, they will try to explain to me in English, versus if I were to, you know, make aliyah from like, and I'd speak Amharic, then like no one there is going to really want to translate it for me. People want to speak English. So it's definitely something that I knew, and I would use it, especially in a scenario where I understood basically the big context of what was going on, but either I wanted to get away with something, or I didn't understand the details of it. Like at the bank, if you start talking to them in Hebrew, they think, well, you read the fine print, you know what's going on. And the truth is I didn't get that part. So I have to speak in English so that someone will help me. So it's definitely something that I put into the character. And the other thing is that when I was writing it, there's like two things that you take into consideration. Because the first thing is, I obviously want there to be some kind of thing where she makes up. Two things played into it. One is that like, I wanted there to be some kind of thing where she makes aliyah. It doesn't make any sense for her to be speaking so much Hebrew right off the bat, but I did take from my own experience and from a lot of people that I know who coming from like, you know, a yeshiva or something in New York, you do have a basic level of Hebrew, or at least they like tried to give us a basic level of Hebrew. And I always had the motivation to try to know what the boys were saying, the Israeli guys were saying. So I had this motivation to want to speak Hebrew. So I came in with some kind of base. So she wasn't starting from zero, because I thought, you know, it's good to use it. Someone who kind of has a grasp on the language, it's really good for humor or with like playing with tension in scenes. So I definitely put that on her character. It was like, that was a choice. The other thing is, I wanted there to be some kind of thing where she ends up speaking more and more Hebrew as the show goes on. And I think that there was also, it's hard for me to say if I succeeded in what my original plan was, because you write a script and then people have feedback. And then on top of that, the network says, we're an Israeli network. We need to have a show that works in Israel. We don't want them to think we bought this show from America. What's nice about now is something that it seems so obvious to me that there would be this really like easy mix between English and Hebrew. Because that's a lot of the people that I know, and I live in Tel Aviv, everyone here speaks English. Like it seemed obvious that that would be fine. And I think only because of streamers and like Netflix, where they're bringing in shows from other countries, people are more okay with it these days. And it could have also been like good timing that I got away with a lot more than what they initially wanted me to. Yeah, I think I touched on some points. Marnina,
you want to add something there?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. This is awesome. Because I am kind of a little bit of a language geek. Not that I like know a lot, but I just am into it. So I'm having so much fun. Thank you. Yeah, I think that like to the point of like the characters like mocking, like putting on Israeli accents, I found myself there when we were shooting in Tel Aviv very frequently, not necessarily talking in Hebrew, because I was like, I'm still kind of like clumsy in Hebrew, but I was just like, but I want to talk in Israeli accents all the time. So I don't know if that's like, yeah, but I think your point, Sharon, is really interesting of like, that's kind of a cheeky power move too, because it's like, I can, like, maybe I can't speak your language, but I'm going to do your accent.
I will also just add on, just before you said you're going to show a scene with Noki, I'll just say that she Marnina, not Noki. Noki speaks really good Hebrew, but Marnina, as good as her Hebrew is, she doesn't speak it fluently like they do in Israel. And I just want to say to all the people listening, she's a very good actor, and she learned all of the Hebrew texts just for the scenes. And I think that it's not easy to do because people are watching, they were shocked that she got the musicality of the language. Side note, go ahead.
That's actually really a helpful segue to our next clip, excuse me, which has Marnina. So let me share my screen and show you this clip.
Hi.
Hi.
Remember us?
מה הבעיה?
אמא שלי אומרת שהיא עשתה טעות, היא הכריחה אותי לקנות את זה, ועכשיו אין לנו כסף לשום דבר אחר בדירה החדשה שלי.
אני מצטערת. מדהימה. תגידי לה, לי כל כך מה...
She said she's sorry.
That's unacceptable. מה acceptable? זה לא שוק פה, כל הכבוד. תביא נראה. מה זה? את פתחת את זה? זה פתוח. אני לא יכולה להחזיר את זה, אתם לא יכולות. גם הניילון, מה זה? איפה הניילון?
She said you ripped the plastic.
You tell her that we didn't use it, and she can put new plastic. טוב, מה היא רוצה? תסבירי לה שאי אפשר להחליף. אני הסברתי, אם את פותחת על הניילון, אי אפשר, די, נגמר. מה זה? זה כאילו... קצת כבוד.
I actually wanted it anyways. I just was nervous about the price, but it is an elite vacuum, so... What?
Great job, Marnina. And Marnina's character Noki is gets married in the show, and then I guess we can share. I mean, it's already in the episodes that people have seen that she comes out as a lesbian, and but I won't give away what happens later in the show. So Marnina, do you want to say anything about that scene or about learning the Hebrew?
Yeah, well, so I did have like a little bit of a little background in Hebrew beforehand, like enough that I wasn't like starting from zero. I went to Jewish day school, and in my mind, I don't know if this is true, but in my mind, I was conversationally fluent in 8th grade. I don't think it's true, but that was, and then I like got on the plane and I was like, and everyone, it was the peak of Omicron. So everybody else on the plane going to Israel was speaking Hebrew because everyone else had citizenship. And I was like, oh no, I thought it would all come back. So it was kind of a sudden but exciting challenge. And I would like take the scripts, they didn't have the vowels in them, the nekudot, because people don't use that. So instead, some people were like, wait, why are you using the Hebrew? I was like, well, I can read it. I just have to put in by hand all the nekudot for myself. But as I was there for 3 months for shooting, I really did like I was like, whoa, I think I've gotten a lot better. It's amazing when you immerse yourself, how much faster you learn. But yeah, for me, it wasn't just like that I needed to know what I was saying in Hebrew and like what each word that I was saying meant, but also what everyone in the scene that I was in was saying, so that I could like be listening and like reacting, not just like waiting for my turn to talk. And that one in particular with this incredible actor who plays the shopkeeper, Bata El Moseri, she's hysterical. She's a like comedian, and she did a lot of improv. Anytime there was some improvising, that was always like the most like challenging, but it was still fun, but like the most challenging moments for me, because I would just be like I think I get the gist, and I'm just gonna take a leap and hope that what I say makes sense.
Wow.
But
And so were there times when improv led to you being like, Anilo, your dad?
yeah, well, it was tricky because I knew that Noki, my character, would know the language better than me. So so mostly I would just make a guess and hope that it would work out in the edit. But there was one time where I kind of like stammered. I was like, we were improvising out at the end, like we were still rolling at the end of a scene. And I was just kind of like, I meant to say be'emet, but it came out be'ememet, and that became a catchphrase.
We kept it.
Oh, it's in there?
Yeah, now you guys can look for it.
Nice.
But yeah, no, but there was a scene. I mean, we ended up cutting it much shorter just because, not because Marnina wasn't great, just because of whatever the editing. And there was funny, like, to watch her like have a scene where she's kind of struggling, but when you're on the editing table, you know, you still have reactions and like you understand the context of things. So there's still stuff to work with, but we ended up cutting a lot of that scene.
I was just going to say, Marnina, your definition of sort of improvising and hoping that it just comes out okay, I think that pretty much describes, you know, probably the first 3 years of my living in Israel, to be honest. And even today, I was telling Sarah, we were talking just a few days ago in preparation for this, I'm married to somebody who was born and raised in Israel, so he's a native Hebrew speaker, and we speak a lot of Hebrew at home. And she said, well, are there ever times where you're not understood today? And I told her, at least like all the time. You know, I'll say something and Yuval, my husband, will just stop and say, what are you saying? What is that? And, you know, it's a lot of, that's what it means to be in a bicultural, bilingual relationship, are those moments of, you know, improvisation and just hoping that what comes out makes sense to others. And I will say that one of the things also that struck me about the sort of the realistic use of language in this is that of both of your characters, but particularly Chanshi, it's the ability to joke and the ability to lie, or perhaps not be fully honest, let's say it like that, in another language is actually quite challenging. So it's one thing, you know, to go to a market or go somewhere and ask, you know, in very transactional kind of language, right? You know, I need to buy this, I need to open a bank account, that kind of stuff. But it's really, I always found it really a difficult, a next step at least, that you see Chanshi, like she's actually funny. You know, she's funny and she makes jokes and they're understood by others and you get the irony. I mean, they're not ha-ha, but they're more sort of the irony of what she's saying and pointing out sometimes the absurdity of something. That's like a very sophisticated way, I think, of using language. And I thought also that it seemed very realistic to me.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what's called translanguaging, which is when people who are bilingual, who share two languages, can have a conversation and seamlessly mix the two languages together without any indication that they're going from one language to the other. That was very realistic. And the way that Chanshi and her Israeli boyfriend, David, and other characters speak English and Hebrew together. And it was interesting, David mostly spoke Hebrew, except in this one scene, which I'm about to show, where he speaks a bunch of English. So that was realistic. Something that was surprising to me was the lack of meta-linguistic conversation. Wow, your English is, no, actually there was a little bit of that, like, wow, your Hebrew is so good, how did you learn it? And I think the answer for Chanshi was that she practiced with this guy at the shawarma restaurant, right? I think that was the answer. And that makes sense, in addition to the yeshiva education that you would have had some opportunity to practice before you came to Israel. But then also it struck me that there were very few instances of I don't understand what you're saying. Can you say that in English, or what does that word mean? So I don't know. Maybe were there any instances of that?
There's one when you ask what a grill is on Yom Ha'atzmaut.
Oh, mangal.
Yeah, you say, wait, mango, great. Oh wait, what's mango? Or
Mangal, I think there's also in the amla and the bank.
right. You ask what an amla is.
There's always, I think there was a bit more like in the script or writing, and then you kind of cut down in terms of like what's important for the story. Because I think those jokes are always funny and you have to like choose where you're going to put it in. And then you kind of have to balance like what's more important to me here, like to do this pause for this joke or to like continue the drama. Because I think it's also different when you're writing for TV versus writing for film. For TV, it's like you have like the episodes, you kind of have to, you have less time for atmosphere and stuff like that. You have to kind of get the plot going, especially these days when they're always like, people are going to lose interest. People are going to lose interest. You got to get to the next thing. So it's hard to know like where it is.
Yeah, that's really
obviously my life is full of mistakes. Even now I'll like say things and then sometimes my husband will correct me. I'm like, not when I'm upset.
Oh, actually there wasn't a mistake. What was the mistake, Sharon, that you mentioned the other day?
Misrata Panim?
Oh yeah, that one. Misrata Panim. Yeah. Tell us about that.
Well, it's funny. It still happens today. It's not like I said it when I first got to Israel. We were in an Ulpan class and I kept talking about Misrata Panim. I guess I'm hoping most people who are watching like saw that episode in 2 where he corrects her. It's not Misrata Panim, it's Misrata Pnim. The Ministry of Interior, not the Ministry of the Face. And I kept saying Misrata Panim and no one was correcting me until I was in Ulpan one day and they had guest speakers who came in to talk to, I don't know if they were talking to us about taxes. I have no idea what it was. They came in and I said something like, well, I went to Misrata Panim, and they started laughing at me. And I'm like, why is this the first time someone's correcting me? And then it's funny how this joke, it was a joke, but people are still saying it. And when I sat down like with my friend's mom, whatever, she was like, I'm in all these, she lives in Florida, but she's like, I'm in all these groups on Facebook and of all these olim, I just like to watch what they're writing about. And she says all the time they say Misrata Panim, in English, Panim, because it's a word that we know. So let them continue saying it today. Maybe like Chanshi will live on and people will appreciate it instead of looking down on us.
Yeah, or maybe it will become part of the Anglo dialect of Hebrew.
Right. It already is in a way.
Okay, so let's show another clip. This is a clip from the wedding. And in this clip, Chanshi and David and Chanshi's fiance that she has broken up with, Mendy, are standing outside the wedding.
Yeah, I know him from around.
היי, נעים מאוד, מה נשמע? מה קורה?
אני מנדי.
מנדי?
כן, מנדי.
היי, מה קורה?
מה אתה עושה פה?
Nook invited me, the bride. I was invited by bride.
Oh. Here, then I'll go get you another glass. Here, hold on.
Oh, thank you. זה האקס שלך.
מה אתה עושה פה? תפסיק להגיע לפה כל הזמן.
שנייה, אני צלצלתי אליה, והיית עסוקה מן הסתם. כן, אני רציתי לבקש ממך סליחה על זה שעשיתי את השיחה הזאת דקה לפני החתונה. אני הבנתי שהיה עדיף לחכות ולדבר איתך על זה אחר כך. מבינה?
אז אתה אומר שאתה מצטער שיש לך bad timing?
חוזרת לאקס שלך, למנדי הזה?
Get out of your stupid baby. Go, go.
טיפש, אני לא.
No?
לא, no. Thank you.
You know what? I'm cold. We should go in.
Okay, I guess we're going inside.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll join you.
No.
אני רואה שאתה לא שותה הרבה יין.
כן, אני שותה בשביל המצווה.
David likes to drink arak to get drunk, and his idea of eating out is usually something in a pita.
אני אוהב לאכול פיתה, זה קערה וגם הפיץ' שאתה יכול לאכול אותה.
Chanshi, hi. I want to.
Okay, yeah, the writing and the editing is just all so great. Kol hakavod. Okay, any comments on that scene, anybody?
Well, I will say two things behind the scenes things. First one is that Dor, who plays Mendy, he's actually he lives in LA, but he's Israeli, so he speaks fluent Hebrew. He does a great accent.
Wow.
And it happened to work out last minute. We're so glad it did because he's great. And Tomer Machluf, who plays David, he's definitely working on his English, but I wouldn't say it's his strongest point right now. And I think that that scene and then continuation of the scene, like language is important in terms of the fact that I had to build it that everyone will kind of understand what's going on. Because even though he's coming from America, and I think also, like I look at, like my father, he lives in Crown Heights, and like my brother who lives in Crown Heights, also they're Chabad, and like they're very much in their, maybe it's Chabad, I don't know, but they speak Hebrew with a very heavy American accent, but their Hebrew is really good. And I don't know if it's maybe because there's a lot of international people, or I don't know if it's from their school that they put an emphasis on it. I went to Yeshiva Flatbush. I had a basis, but I think it could have been much better. But sorry, I lost track there because I'm just trying to defend everyone. But I think here it really plays into like what you were talking about before, Sharon, about power dynamics. And I think that this scene, and also with these characters where you have the two guys and where she is with the two guys and what she sees in each of them, and how they use language in a way to kind of show the other one, like, how, like, this is my girl. That was definitely like a scene, which I'm thinking now is like the language was very important. Yeah,
I think also something that really happens with like when Homer, this like, you know, hunky guy speaks in his like very adorable accented English, like I think it makes him more like vulnerable and like sweet. And like I love that he said, "I'll enjoin you." I just love that. It's so adorable. So I think also like in terms of story and like the power dynamic, like it puts this like macho motorcycle guy in this new light.
Yeah, that's neat. Sharon, you want to add something?
Yeah, I think that's exactly when I saw that scene the second time I watched it. I thought, gosh, you know, both of these men. I mean, so much of the series, again, in my mind at least, as I saw it, is a commentary about Israeli men. It's a commentary about men, and in that particular scene, even though Mendy is an American visiting Israel, there really is both of these men are weak. And Chanshi has to do a lot of the mediation. And, you know, just because of the situation, they're in this triangle. I love the way they're sitting on the couch in a triangle, right? But she has to do a lot of the mediation to get past this kind of encounter among these people who really shouldn't all be together, you know, talking. And so, you know, both Mendy comes off kind of like, I wouldn't say he's nebbishy, he's not, but he comes off in a particular, you know, he's not macho in any way. He's talking about his wines, and I don't know, there's something about also like what he's talking about, which is probably read a certain way. And then David also, exactly when he says, you know, I join you, and you know, I think the will is there, but it's actually hard to see. But it's not, you know, it's a belabored English. I think also, you know, he's the macho kind of Israeli archetype in some ways, and in that scene you see a real, much more vulnerable character. I did want to ask one other thing, though, if possible, about language that I didn't bring up before I was looking at my notes, which is very different. Is this an okay time to ask it, or should
Yeah,
we?
sure.
Sure. So I'm really curious about the music choices, because up till now we've really been focused on the language among the characters. I have so much to say, but I can't talk about it too much because most of the audience has not seen the last 6 episodes. I have so much to say. In the first episode or second episode, Chanshi says, on behalf of American Jews, and I learned Hebrew in order to be able to speak to you. I mean, there's so much interesting stuff there. And that you raised the fact that you learned Hebrew because of this guy that you saw at the shawarma place in Brooklyn, which later becomes a really big part of the plot. There's so much to say about that, but I won't say it because I don't want to spoil anything or anything like that. So I hope if people are able to see the last 6 episodes, maybe you could do this again and talk about that, because it seemed to me also like, what is like language learning in terms of like how it connects to these other experiences that go on in people's lives. You don't learn a language in a vacuum, meaning it's connected to the people who teach you, to the people you're interacting with. And I just thought that that's really fascinating that you talk about when you're learning language, and that, later on, this character with whom you might have been practicing Hebrew when you were learning becomes a bigger figure. So I won't say more about that, but maybe in the future you can bring that up. But to go back to the music, the choices are just brilliant. And I don't know if that's something you specifically, if you were involved in those choices, but you pull from in the episodes that people saw, you really, when you're walking around Jerusalem, you just want to hear, what is it, Erev Shoshanim? Maybe, I don't remember, or is it a different song?
Erev Shoshanim is the end of 2. It's in 4.
Right.
And isn't that also the tune that he plays on the flute?
That's the tune he plays on the flute on 2, and then she sings it with him on 4. Yeah.
Right. So I loved that you are evoking, or you're talking about these songs that to many Israelis, this is an Israel that is it's clearly part of Israel, but it's not the songs that are being sung today or heard today. But American Jews, we relate to songs that Israelis. Sarah's heard this story before, but I grew up in a camp where we would sing these songs about the Palmach and things like this. And my husband, again, would hear these songs and he would just be like, I don't understand. Like, I just truly don't understand what is going on. Tell me about the choice of songs and what they, these Hebrew songs that really speak to the character development and the plot, and how much that was your choice or what you were trying to do here.
So specifically episode 4 is like, in a way, kind of like Israeli musical, because Chanshi singing a lot. There's a lot of music going on, also like what's playing in the car and all that stuff. For me, I love these old Israeli songs, which has to do with, I think, the American, I don't know if it's like everywhere. I do think that it's very American like experience of going to a Zionist school and like what they would sing in the choir. And then when I would go to Israel and like when I was just like visiting times, I still had this, and there's a part of me that's still like, I'm Zionist, and I'm still, there's this like ideal of what Israel can be or will be or is in my mind. And then, then there's also like reality of the fact that they've moved on, or it's not really what I thought it was. So for me, like that was something that I wrote into the script. Specifically, the song Erev Shel Shoshanim, which is in 2 and is in 4, I actually had a different song that I wanted to put in there, that I wanted him to play in 4. This is all behind the scenes. In episode 4, when I wanted him to start playing a song, I picked a song that I really liked, which is a great song. Sorry, I can't think of it right now. I'm not going to waste time on that. But it was too hard for the actor to play on the guitar. It was too, and he doesn't play guitar. So we picked a different song and, for the actor so that he could play it, and we went along with it. And then in the editing process, we were like, what if it's the song he plays on the flute in 2? and we're like, wouldn't that be a great idea? And that's like a script story change that happened actually in the editing room. Another thing about so that was something that was like always in the script. Like I always wanted this like old Israeli music, because for me, it was part of like making aliyah, and it's part of the American experience of like the way we view Israel. The other thing about the music is we worked with this great musician. His name is Shuzin. He's got a bunch of different names, but one of the reasons why I chose him is because I heard his music in a different series, and I realized that he's a really good at I forgot, I don't know the word in English, but he can like copy different styles, like of all different genres, right? Sorry. And so that was something that I wanted, because first of all, I wanted like Jewish American kind of like music and background and choices like that. I wanted all to be original music. And he was really good at like listening to like Miami Boys Choir and then making a version of it, with like, not a version of it, but like inspired by what you hear in episode 1 when she gets off the plane. And like, he's just brilliant that he was able to go in all these different directions. And some people were like, is this a Miami Boys Choir song? Just that was the specific one, and it actually worked. He's just so good. Another thing also, just in terms of music, when you're choosing it, is like their money is involved, because you can hear songs that are playing in the background of a certain scene or something. Each time you have a song, you have to pay for it, and it costs a lot of money. So there are choices that you make in production in terms of, you're saying, how many of it how much money do we have to buy to put original songs that are playing in the background and things like, how much can it be free, and how much can we make original music, because that's a lot of work, and you only have a certain amount of time to actually like do it. I'm really happy with the way the music turns out.
Yeah, it's great. And there's Eretz, 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 and there's Hallelujah. And these are songs that American Jews learn in America and then come to Israel and like, why are they playing hip hop and not these songs that I know?
But on a personal note, it was also when I realized that I would sing it and I'd get kind of like this shock value for it. It was something that I used from that point on. Just like if you learn a phrase, you use it every time you can with new people, like in Hebrew, So I knew that like, I knew all these songs that like their parents knew, or like they had somewhat heard of, and suddenly I knew all the words to it, where like I didn't know any of the modern music. And I would use that to like get attention and like hit on boys and stuff. And it worked.
Okay, I'm going to show the final clip right now. This is from episode 9, and it's where we meet Chanshi's dad, stepmom, and stepmom's friend. And we get to hear some of the Orthodox Jewish English, Brooklyn inflected.
Chanshi! Chanshi!
Hi, Babshi.
Oh my God, look at you! You look amazing. So skinny, so stunning. Doesn't she look stunning?
Stunning.
And stark. You look very, very stark. Doesn't she look stark?
Very, very stark.
Where's my father?
Oh, he went to wash. You got color. Israel looks good on you. We really miss you. What, you didn't say anything? You don't think she looks excellent? Oh, here he is. Oh, here he comes. What happened?
He needs bread. Bread.
Oh, what's the matter with these people? They don't put bread next to the sink.
I don't know why. It's a Bahad place. The waitress.
Okay, one
He
second.
needs
I'll
bread.
get you bread. One
I don't
second.
get this. This
It's
is
a restaurant,
It's a Bahad
Chef, right?
restaurant.
It's okay, it's okay. She's coming on.
לא, סליחה, פשוט אבא שלי צריך את זה, סליחה, תא.
are you?
Baruch Hashem, pretty good.
Excellent.
Doesn't she look stunning? Your daughter? She looks like a regular Sudeikis.
Stunning. You look beautiful.
So you're living with no Keegan. That's very nice.
Yeah, in an apartment for girls who cancel their weddings. What? It was a joke. Girls who can't.
Your father loves eggs.
Look at this. They have everything here. I mean, they have Italian, they have Asian. That's the noodles, right?
Oh, they have the most amazing breakfasts here.
They have curry. That's Indian.
Oh, look, you love this.
Oh, my favorite. They have lemonade with nana. I'm crazy about that.
Okay. So delightful. Can you just tell us who those actors are and what else they're famous for?
Me?
Yeah, sure.
Well, I don't think I need to tell people who they're famous for, but there's Henry Winkler, which I saw in one of the questions someone asked about the Fonz. And Caroline Ahrens plays his wife / my stepmother, and she's in Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. I think she plays Mrs. Maisel, right?
No, she plays mother-in-law.
Yeah, who is Mrs.
Oh, Maisel. Oh, yes, sorry.
Yeah. And yeah. And the other woman at the table, who I'm sure you all recognize from episode 3, is Elkie Jacobs, who is BFF since their 20s with Caroline Ahrens, which is part of the reason why we were able to make a connection and get her here to Israel.
Right. Yeah, great casting, and they just did such a great job. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the language in that scene, because there we hear a lot of Yiddish influence, and someone asked in the questions about Yiddish use in Brooklyn, and there was no indication that your dad and stepmom speak Yiddish, but they certainly speak Yiddish influenced English, and so there we heard tzedekis, which means it's a female version of tzaddik, essentially, and like a righteous person. Stark, which literally means strong, but means very religious. And then we had your dad's gonna go wash. He went to wash, and that's a Yiddish influence in because normally you say wash your hands, but just to say wash, that it's Jewish English. And so I think this show did a great job of representing not only the Hebrew and English mixing of Americans, Anglos in Israel, but also the Yiddish and Hebrew influenced English of English-speaking Jews, and then also the Brooklyn accents, right, and the intonation, and even Henry Winkler got that, a little bit of that intonation in there. So can you say anything, Aleeza, about the scripting for that, or the acting, or the directing, or how that all played out?
The script, when I wrote the script, when I wrote those characters, I took, it's not this is fiction, so obviously it's based on things that I know. And my father and my stepmother, I do have a stepmother, they do speak with this very like Yiddish Jewish English, which is something that I was also very used to. But my mother, who she grew up completely secular, and she became more religious as she was in her 20s, she didn't have that same background. She grew up in Parsippany, New Jersey. So I was also very good at going in between both worlds, because they use different words when they're speaking. Now the problem is when I'm this is a side note, but like when I sometimes will translate scripts, and I'll have to look back over what I translated to make sure that I didn't translate it into Jewish English, and then it's real English. Like, I'm not sleeping by her, you know what I mean? I'm sleeping at her house, things like that. And it was fun with these characters is because I could write the English that I know that like certain, circles, like with my father and stuff, that they speak. So there's what's in the script, and there were certain like phrases that I wanted to keep that didn't always work, because it's hard to sometimes explain it, or someone who's learning a text doesn't necessarily know your mistakes that are there intentionally if they're not from that world. So I think that they really did capture the essence of what it is that I wanted. And I think it's also when you watch the episodes in the order that you watch them, it's definitely like a splash with the language to kind of like see if like that, to understand that Chanshi came from a different background than where we see her in now. And I mean, it was fun because they both know Brooklyn. So that wasn't like a hard thing to do. I was recently thinking of, because now I have a 5-month-old daughter who I'm like, oh, I'm going to have to potty train her one time. Am I going to say, do you have to make? Which is something that we would say at home, which doesn't translate. And also I think it's like Yiddish or like based off of more fun language stuff.
Yeah. It was really interesting for me to think about the subtitles. In the English subtitled version, there are subtitles for the whole thing, right? Not just for the Hebrew lines, or I mean captions. Or
For the whole episode, it's all in English or it's all in Hebrew.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting because, you know, sometimes TV shows or movies will have subtitles only when it's a thing that they think people can't understand. And we'll be talking about that in the later events in this series. Like when we talk about Jewish matchmaking, their subtitles are sporadic only when they think the viewer might not understand what's being said. But here, the fact that there are subtitles throughout the whole, I mean, captions, I guess we would call it, through the whole thing, suggests that, I mean, it's important because a lot of the English wouldn't be understood by English speakers because it's so Jewish, and not just the language, but, you know, even I think we need to explain that the reason that he was going like this is because you're supposed to eat bread after washing your hands and not talk in between those two acts, and except to say the blessing, which he does, he mumbles it quietly or whispers it. And so, you know, all these religious cultural things that would need explanation for an audience that's not in the know. It's just so delightful to see these represented on TV. And, you know, it's really a new trend, I think. I mean, not completely new, but I think we see a lot more of it now with The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. And although there's a little less Jewish, it's a little less Jewish than this, and with Rough Diamonds, with Transparent, which came out several years ago. And there's all these new shows now that have that portray Jewishness, and there's a big linguistic element to all that.
There's also kind of look, I mean, you guys watched all 10 episodes. Hopefully people here will want to watch it. There's okay, when I was in Sundance and we screened it, and it was, you know, we screened 4 episodes at the Sundance, we had like 5 screenings, and each time it's like there was always this like thought of like, what if everybody who shows up is just like Jewish or Israeli, and like, so is it really translating to other people, like the content of the story? And I was very happy to see that it was people who weren't necessarily Jewish or Israeli or affiliated at all, and that they enjoyed the story. And for me, I think it really was a gamble, because I go, okay, I watch shows that are in different languages and I've translated things. There's always going to be things lost in translation. And there are certain jokes that I put in that I insist that this is here because the people who will understand these jokes will appreciate it. And the people who don't understand, they're going to totally miss it. And it's going to go over their heads. And I'm like, that's a choice I made, and that's fine. But therefore I need the rest of the scene to make sense to someone. Otherwise, if they're getting stuck on like certain small things, I'm going to lose my audience. And the hope is, and I mean, with you guys, it worked out, but in a way you could be my audience in a way because you speak both languages, but there's like a chance you take when you put something out there and you're like, I'm going to make it specific. I'm going to make it the world that I know. And that means that there's going to be language and words and grammar things that are going to happen. And a lot of people are going to miss them. So, like with the scene with the parents, like what I aimed for is like also the atmosphere of what it's like to be when your parents come to visit you, and like, you know, and everyone's talking it in a way, are they saying important things? What are they talking, you know? So if that comes through, then it's okay that the small things slide through for that very small group of people who will appreciate it.
Yeah, and
because I feel like I would appreciate it. Do you know what I mean? Like if I was watching, I'd be like, oh, I love that he said like to go wash, you know?
Yeah, totally. Or like someone in the questions points out the way they say stunning. It's like it has an Orthodox feel to it, like a Yiddish influence. And what you're talking about really reminds me of something that Dara Horn wrote about her literature, which is that there's a coded understanding that there are different layers of understanding from different audiences. So I think some people will watch this and even if you have no knowledge of Israel or of Judaism, you'll get it. You'll understand the immigrant experience and the becoming less religious experience. Oh, sorry, was that a spoiler? And the the issues of sexuality and the stereotyping. You'll understand those main points of the series. But you'll get something different out of it. And there's a phrase in Jewish English, hamevin yavin, which is from Hebrew. It means those who get it will get it. Those in the know will understand. And I think there's a lot of that here. And in any creative work, and like in Dara Horn's books, she has a lot of Christian followers who love her works because there's so many biblical references. But there's also a lot of there are a lot of references to Midrash and other rabbinic literature that they're not going to get, right? And Yiddish literature. And so the idea of understanding different things by different audiences is, I was thinking about that when watching this. Let's turn now to our audience questions, and audience, feel free to put into the chat, into the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, any questions that you have, and several have come in already. So we'll start by addressing some of them. Someone asked, are we allowed to ask where you got funding for this project? Any Jewish or Israeli foundations?
The funding is from the Israeli network, HOT. They're the ones who put down the money. Yeah, that's it.
Great, okay.
Low budget.
Well, it didn't seem low budget, right? It seemed very professional and yeah.
Well, professional doesn't necessarily have to do with budget, because we had a great group of a great crew and a great cast, and everything was really, really fun. But like we were given, I'll just explain something because it has to do with this. In Israel, there's not enough money to do a pilot, film it, to then try to sell it, then do the rest of the series. Here, it's like you sell the script, the pilot script. And if they say yes, then you go out and you film the entire thing, because you're filming based on location. You're never filming based on episodes. That's why you don't have like an episode directed by this person or by that person. It's like, it's got to be all in one, because we're going like, okay, this first week we're filming everything that happens in Jerusalem. This next week we're filming everything that happens in this apartment from episode 1 to episode 10. So there's no room for that.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, next question is Marnina, how did you get cast as Noki? And tell us about that experience of auditioning.
Well, there is a language story in here too. So they were kind of just like casting a wide net and just hunting on Instagram for actresses who looked Jewish and like reaching out. Our director, Aaron Geva, was that just took it on for himself to do that. So I got this like random direct message on Instagram asking if I wanted to audition for an Israeli series. And I knew he was serious because he also reached out through my website. So I was like, okay, it's not just Instagram spam. But I never thought that, like, I was like, ha ha ha, yeah, I'll film these 2 scenes. And actually Mendy, the actor who played Mendy Dor, he's a friend of mine. He came over and he helped me with my tapes. and that's how I knew how to pronounce some of the Hebrew without nekudot in my audition, was that he sent me a little voice memo for those words. And actually I was in the middle of like helping run some high holidays stuff at the Silver Lake Independent JCC. So it was like a very crazy time for me. And I didn't really have the time to like learn the full scene all in Hebrew, but I wanted to show them that like I could speak Hebrew if if pushed, and I wanted to. So and they sent me the scene also entirely in English. So I kind of like rewrote a version of the scene that was like mostly English, but I loved that like she was switching languages and would like drop English phrases into this Hebrew scene. So I like did a version of it where it was mostly English, but I was like throwing in some of the Hebrew phrases from the Hebrew version of the text. So I think, I don't know, maybe that helped me stand out from the group.
And
Aleeza,
Aleeza, how did you advertise that role? Like that you were looking for an American actress?
We were originally just looking in Israel, it's a budget thing also. We were looking for someone who spoke mother tongue English. And the problem was we got a lot of people who spoke really good English, but it was not mother tongue. It's like they didn't understand what that meant. So we ended up trying to reach out. And I think that a lot of Israelis, it took them a long time to understand that there's this card that we have, the way that Americans who like Israel and live in America would love a chance to do something in Israel, like even though it's like an Israeli production, it's not Hollywood, okay? It's like very guerrilla. And so I think it's something also that speaks to Americans to like be a part of something, when Israelis who, especially ones who don't really have a connection with like anybody in America, they're like, why would anybody want to come here? So that worked out. And literally what happened, we saw Marnina's tape, and it's like, yeah, the language thing was a factor, which is why we liked it, but also it's a vibe. It's something you pick up. It's an energy you picked up. What I didn't pick up was how tall she was. So I was surprised when she showed up, and I was like, oh, I feel very short. Interesting. Didn't look that way on Zoom. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well,
I'm 5'7". It's like I'm not like very, very tall, but Aleeza's kind of short.
Well, this gets to someone else's question about the word sidekick, which is in there. It says, the question is, what is the Hebrew word for sidekick, which is what Noki used to describe herself in relation to Chanshi in episode 3 or 4? I'm asking because I didn't catch Noki's queerness until late in episode 4. And so I'm wondering if sidekick in Hebrew had more of a queer connotation. I thought it was actually just said in English. Is that right?
Yeah.
She says it in English, and the thing is we translated it in the translation. We wrote in Hebrew letters. We transliterated sidekick, which is funny because there are some words that at this point Israelis use and they're just English. And then if you would ask them, do you know how to say this in English? They would say, I don't know, because they don't realize that they're just saying a word that's in English. Because there are certain things that also don't really translate. Like I don't know what the Hebrew word is, but whatever it is, it doesn't have the same connotation. And it has nothing to do with queerness. And if it does, then I'm unaware.
Yeah, it was just like that I think the point there in that scene was that Chanshi was the main person and Noki was like the sidekick.
Sidekick.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to turn to some questions for Sharon. I'm going to read 2 different questions. Kevin and Shuli Babbitt's right, as Aleeza alluded to, Jewish day school graduates generally have basic but not great Hebrew. Do you think it's a failure of the Jewish day school system that so many smart kids aren't capable of, for example, watching Chanshi without subtitles after 12 years of Hebrew classes? So how does this compare to children who spend similar amounts of time studying other languages in elementary and high school? And I'm going to also add into this another question by Esther Kustanowitz, who asks, well, first she says she loves the show, Aleeza and Marnina. And then she says Hebrew can act as such a uniter or divider when Americans visit or move to Israel. There's knowing the words, knowing the grammar, using the words wrong because of misvowling, or because now they mean something else in slang, the speed and aggressiveness with which you deliver the words, the cultural references, etc. Even day schools don't necessarily prepare people for speaking Hebrew in Israel. Is there a better way for diaspora Jews or Jewish schools to learn or teach Hebrew so that they're not so lost and disempowered when they get to Israel? And if so, what are the impediments to implementing that in the US? Big question, Sharon. I guess your next book is going to focus on these, but
it really does. It really does. Gosh, I'll just say very quickly that if I had like probably a dime or 10 agrot for every time I get questioned, every time I get asked, like, how could day schools, like, why is it that my child spent 6-10 years in a day school and they can't order a falafel? For some reason, that's always the example. Why is it they can't order a falafel in Israel? I always say, if I had 10 agrot for that, I could probably buy myself a few falafel at this point in Israel, because that is such a, it's just a key question that gets asked. And I guess my response is that Jewish day schools, each one is different, and and it goes into what their priorities and values are regarding Hebrew. And so they might be spending a lot of time around Jewish texts, sacred texts, and children have incredible capacity to read and interpret and do really sophisticated things with those written texts, or perhaps know Hebrew for other kinds of things. And the focus of the school, while they might be teaching Hebrew, isn't necessarily on a spoken language. So, I think it's really about going back to always what's a school's mission. That's kind of dry and maybe, but I think when you ask schools, even why are you teaching Hebrew? Which Hebrew are you teaching, first of all? And then why are you doing this? From my experience, from my own research, I found actually a lot of schools don't necessarily have a very clear-cut answer to that question, because they're trying to do everything and to just add to I think it was in the first question, someone said, is this different from other languages? Well, you don't see, when you're teaching Spanish to American children who don't speak Spanish already, or French, you're teaching them the language so that they can speak Spanish. You're not teaching them to necessarily love Dominican Republic or feel an attachment to a place or a heritage or something like that. You're teaching a language so that they can use the language. Hebrew gets wrapped up in a lot of other stuff that other languages that we teach in the United States don't necessarily engage with. So that's a very short way of saying that. I think the second question, I saw Esther's question in the Q&A, and I love the question. I think, more and more in my own research and speaking to both people who live in Israel and American Jews there are American Jews who are very passionate about learning modern Hebrew and using it. And, there is this notion that it's always going to be, again, it's this power dynamic between Israeli Jews and American Jews. And one way that gets played out is often through Hebrew, right? It's the rare American Jew who speaks a Hebrew that is not discernible on some level. So whether it's accent or something that doesn't mark the person as non-native Israeli Hebrew speaking. Right? There are very few people I know who actually speak that level of Hebrew. And even the ones who speak, I'm thinking specifically of one person who speaks such an amazing Hebrew, it's almost too good for the average Israeli, right? And so there's, this is always going to be a thing. And I would just say that my take on it is that American Jews probably just need to get over it, because they're never going to be, they're never going to win that. And, even if you speak a fluent-ish Hebrew, you're never fully an insider. And that's just sort of, to some degree, and that's okay. I mean, I don't see, I think it's also in the way that we position that. So more and more, I just come to realize that, there's always something that gives you away. And so, I embrace it at this point in my life. I embrace that and just see like, you know, and that's why I love the comment that I said earlier that Chanshi makes in the thing, like, I worked hard to learn this language to speak to you, she says. And I hear that from a lot of people, like, leave me alone that I don't speak a perfect Hebrew. Leave me alone that my accent is, you know, like it hurts your ear, so to say. You know, I've worked hard to learn this language and I'm proud of it. So I guess that's my short answer to both those questions, which are great questions.
I think for the most part too, like in my experience, like people don't care if you are speaking it with grammatical errors or an accent. Like I think just the act of like trying to speak their language, and that's true, I think, with other languages too, usually. Like I think because Americans have the reputation of like going abroad and just like unabashedly speaking in English, it's like, oh wow, like you made any effort as an American, as an English speaker, to learn the language of the place, like that's appreciated. And that's something that came up too when I was like learning my texts, like the script as Noki was. I first had a sort of a Hebrew coach. She had just come out of being a commander in the army and like knew somebody on production. She wasn't really like a Hebrew teacher per se, but she spoke Hebrew and English. And she was like she really wanted me to like have a good Israeli accent. And I kept trying to be like, no, like my character is American and like, that's okay. There's gonna be an American accent. And we're not trying to get rid of it. Like, I just need to learn my lines and know what I'm saying. But she kept being like, who? It's short. Listen to this, who? But she actually had a really good American accent. So that wasn't a fair impersonation of her.
That's great.
Wait, can I just say, I want to say something about the schools, because I'm thinking about my experience in Yeshiva Flatbush, which definitely like compared to the other schools that I had met up with, like when I was 16, I did like Gatna or whatever, and I came on a trip, I had the best Hebrew out of all of them. And I felt my Hebrew was shitty. And I think, and it's just like, this is just a comment on it. I think that, I don't know what's going on now specifically with Shiva Flatbush. But I remember, you know, everyone telling stories about the glory days of when it was first opened, how people would speak Hebrew in the halls and how they would make sure it was very like immersed in Hebrew and everything that they did. And when I was there, people were not speaking Hebrew in the halls. The only one who did like the Hebrew plays were people whose parents were Israeli and they anyways had a grasp on the language. And I think right now, when I was there, I was the last class that graduated that we had some kind of like 45% between like the Syrian and Sephardic Jews and Ashkenaz. And at a certain point, like the community around the school, like there's not a lot of Ashkenaz kids left in the school. I don't know right about now. And my point is that I don't know in terms of like the Hebrew, what it is, but it's relating to Sharon, what you said before. I think at this point, the school is now in a very different place than what they said that they were on paper and where they came from. And now they're like about that community. And I think it's like, what's important to the community that is mostly in that school. And I think that when I was there, like it also like Hebrew wasn't at the forefront of like what it was that people wanted from that school that they sent them to.
Really interesting. And I'm glad you mentioned the historical changes, because in our book, Hebrew Infusion, we talk about Yeshiva Flatbush and other schools like that being feeders for Camp Masad, which was a Hebrew immersion camp. And it worked because they had learned so much Hebrew in their school. Okay, we have time for just one more question. And it's actually three people's questions, which are about the name Chanshi. Is there significance to that name? Is it from Chana? Is it a diminutive of Chana? And how did you choose it? And why is it spelled with an aleph in the Hebrew version?
It's spelled with an aleph in the Hebrew version. I'll just start with that because then you say Chanshi for the Israeli speakers, because without the nikudot it could be Chanshi. Do you know what I mean? Like it definitely makes it more Chanshi. So that's what the aleph. And the name, I just thought it would be funny to have a name that for some people might be hard to say because it starts with a CH. And I wanted to be something that was either messed up and somewhat memorable to get people talking. That was really the thing. And I thought it was a fun name. And it's from Chana, but it's like a nickname of Chana. It has nothing to do with my last name. And I
was wondering, that's what I thought, yeah.
No, everyone assumed that, and I guess I should have thought about it, but I didn't. And it was like I went to a camp with a girl that we called her Chanshi, but like so, and I guess I always kind of liked the nickname, and I thought it's very Jewish. It gives you a ch. It's a fun name. It doesn't necessarily say this or that, but I think it has like a fun element to it, and I thought it was just like fun for the character.
Love that. That's great. And then Noki is also a fun one because it's short for Nechama, and that's just a common practice in Orthodox communities to have fun nicknames for nicknames, and I thought that was very realistic. Okay, well now thank you everyone. This was wonderful, a wonderful conversation, and I'm now going to turn it over to Hannah Pressman, the Jewish Language Project Director of Education and Engagement, to tell us a little bit more about other events in this series and about the work of the Jewish Language Project.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. On behalf of the HUC JIR Jewish Language Project, I'd like to thank everyone in the audience for attending today's event on language in the TV show Chanshi. Thank you again to all of our panelists for being with us today and providing a fascinating behind-the-scenes perspective on the show. And a big thank you to our co-sponsor, ICAR. Part of the Jewish Language Project's core mission is to regularly convene experts across disciplines, as well as speakers and heritage learners, to share their findings and thereby raise awareness of Jewish languages, both their rich history and their current precariousness. We provide these programs to the public free of charge so that all can come and learn. The Jewish Language Project is a nonprofit organization, and we rely on donor support to keep our initiatives going. That's why we're inviting you to be part of the movement to preserve Jews' precious linguistic heritage and raise awareness about Jewish cultural diversity. Sarah's going to drop the link to our current fundraising campaign into the chat. Thank you, Sarah. You can also reach the fundraiser by clicking on the donate or volunteer button on our homepage. We are already 25% of the way towards our goal of raising $20,000 to sustain current programming and create new resources. Any donation gets us closer to our vision of making a world of Jewish languages accessible to everyone. Thank you so much. Today's Chanshi event is the first of 4 in our summer series, Jewish Language on TV. Next up on Sunday, July 16th, we'll dig into the family crime drama Rough Diamonds, set in the Hasidic community of Antwerp, Belgium. Then on Sunday, August 13th, we'll explore the history of the world part 2, a continuation of Mel Brooks' popular show, which is now out on Hulu. And we'll conclude the series on Sunday, August 20th with the Netflix hit Jewish Matchmaking. And that panel will include the matchmaker herself, dating coach Aleeza Shalom. Please check our events page, jewishlanguages.org/events, for all the details and registration for these programs, and spread the word. There are lots of ways to plug into what's going on at the Jewish Language Project. Our website, jewishlanguages.org, has a large collection of exhibits and resources. We have a Redbubble shop with all kinds of fun items like mugs, stickers, shirts, puzzles, and more. And all merchandise proceeds support our initiatives. And if you're not already following us on social media, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. We post fun facts, lexicon gems, reels, content from partner organizations, buzzworthy language news, event reminders, and more. The very best way to keep up with all of our activities is to subscribe to our email list for occasional updates about events, programming, and research. And Sarah's going to drop the link to the subscription for the newsletters. Here at the Jewish Language Project, we believe that there is a world of history in every Jewish language, and each speaker has something to teach us. Thank you again for joining us today's program about Chanshi. Take care, and we hope to see you soon.